What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 12 deadline. So as always, I'm going to go through the latest press conference information, answer some of your questions, and talk about my own team at the end as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Make sure to get your predictions in for Sleeper's Premier League Pick'em game as well. There are prizes on offer if you join my league. Links in the description below, and more on that to come later. So let's start with Liverpool, and I think Arne Slot is becoming one of my favourite managers when it comes to FPL information because he's always quite open with news. So on Alisson, he said he's back in training with the goalkeeper coach. He's not training with the team yet. He's not ready for Game Week 12. He didn't say how long he would be out for, but I got the impression he'd be back fairly soon, maybe Game Week 13 or 14. So no need to buy Alisson right now, no need to buy Kelleher either. But obviously if you picked up Kelleher already, then you're going to get the Southampton game, which I think feels pretty good if you're already an owner. On Trent, he said he's not training with us, but we expect him back soon. Now, what soon means, I don't know, but he's definitely going to be out of Game Week 12 if he's not training with the team yet. Obviously, they got another match against Real Madrid midweek, then Man City in Game Week 13, so we will hear from Slot some more, but it doesn't help us with the decision about whether or not to keep Trent. I'm going to talk about my own team later. There is a possibility that I'll hold on to him, but only because I could just sell a different defender instead. If you're looking to free up money for another move, or you don't want to keep that much money in your defence in Trent, then I think it's perfectly fine to sell him, because missing that Southampton game is annoying, right? Because it's the best one of the next four. City at home, probably no clean sheet. Newcastle away is going to be difficult as well. And then Everton away in 15 onwards, the fixtures get a little bit better. So all I can tell you is Trent's going to be out for 12. When he's back, I don't know. I think for most people, he's probably a sell. But if you've got other issues to deal with first, I think it's okay to keep hold of him for now. And then on Van Dijk, he said he's completely okay, which I was expecting anyway, but I think he pulled out of international duty a little bit earlier. But if you want to buy Van Dijk, he is fine. So for Newcastle, Eddie Howe spoke about Callum Wilson, and he said he's doing well. We anticipate he's going to train with the group today. Whether he's quite there for West Ham, let's see. But he has to get through the next few days in training first. So he's close to making the squad, but it's not a guarantee for Game Week 12. You'd assume if he's close now, it'll probably be in the squad moving forward from like Game Weeks 13 onwards. Now for FPL, no one's buying Callum Wilson, of course, but he does maybe play a part in Isak's minutes going forward. Now, if you're thinking about buying Isak this week, this news would not put me off whatsoever. Callum Wilson hasn't yet played a single minute for Newcastle this season. The idea that he's going to come straight back in and take significant minutes off of Isak seems quite low. Now, there are extra fixtures over December, and it might be that if Callum Wilson can get himself fully fit and Isak needs a rest, he might get a benching over the next kind of 5 to 6 game weeks, maybe 7 to 8 game weeks, whatever span of weeks you're looking at. But I think it was always a possibility that Isak might miss like one game. What I don't expect him to start doing is missing like every other game or 2 games in every 6. I just don't see that happening. Isak is the better number 9. He's going to play the majority of minutes, and Callum Wilson's going to take a little bit of time to get himself up to full fitness. So possibly plays a small part in Isak's FPL potential going forward, but it's so minimal, I would still buy Isak if you're considering it. And then on Trippier, he said he's slightly closer than Callum Wilson. He trained well yesterday and felt good. No ill effects, looked sharp. That was his first day of training. So again, we're in a similar position in that right at the end of rehab, you've got to navigate the last few days well. So he's not guaranteed to go straight back in. I don't think that Trippier is someone people are looking to buy, but obviously he will play a part in Liveramento's minutes going forward. Now, if this was maybe 2 seasons ago, I would expect Trippier to come back in pretty quick, right? But at the moment, Lewis Hall and Liveramento as the fullbacks are just playing really well. So I don't think it's a guarantee that Liveramento loses his place straight away, but it probably would put me off buying. If you're going to buy a Newcastle defender, you probably go for Lewis Hall instead. I guess the other thing people might be slightly worried about is Trippier coming back and playing right back and Liveramento playing left back, which we've seen before, ahead of Lewis Hall. I'm not convinced that's going to happen anymore. I think that happened last season when Eddie Howe didn't necessarily trust Lewis Hall. And there was weird stuff going on as well about the deal from Chelsea and stuff like that. I think Lewis Hall is now the first choice left back. And I think if Trippier plays, it'll be with Hall, not with Livramento. So, look, Lewis Hall, if you want to buy him, is not a 100% guaranteed to start every single game anyway. But I think he is clearly first choice right now. And I don't think Trippier has a massive impact in that. But I think he will have a bit of an impact in Livramento going forward. I'm just not sure it's going to be straight away because I think Livramento has played well. Before this weekend's Premier League matches start back up again, don't forget to download the Sleeper app. And more importantly, don't forget to join the Let's Talk FPL Pick'em League by using the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen. Like all games in the Sleeper app, it's completely free to play. And with Premier League Pick'em, all you have to do is predict whether it's going to be a home win, an away win, or a draw for each game every weekend. To show you how easy it is to make your predictions, I'm going to put mine in now. So first of all, I'm going to go for Chelsea to beat Leicester. With Bournemouth versus Brighton, that's a hard game to call. They're two very good sides. So I'm going to go for a draw. I think Villa will beat Palace. Arsenal to beat Forest with their first clean sheet in a very long time. I'm hoping for that double Arsenal defence to come through for me. Everton versus Brentford, I'm going to go for an away win because I think Brentford have just got goals in them at the moment. And I don't really rate Wolves' defence, so I'm going to go for a Fulham win. City Spurs, there's going to be goals in that one, but I think Man City will get the win at home like they usually do, although they haven't won for a little while now. Liverpool to beat Southampton. I've got to go for Man United to beat Ipswich. Amorim's first Premier League win, I hope. And then Newcastle versus West Ham. It's got to be a Newcastle win. That is it. At the moment, there's prizes on offer every single week. I'm going to put up £100 worth of Amazon gift vouchers. And if there's a tie where more than one person has made the same number of correct predictions, I'll do a draw on the following deadline stream. So if a few of you get the same predictions at the top for Game Week 12, I'll do the draw on the Game Week 13 deadline stream. Hopefully that makes sense. Use the link in the description below to get it downloaded or scan that QR code on screen. It's completely free. What have you got to lose? For Arsenal, there was quite a bit of information from Mikel Arteta, so much so that I couldn't fit it all onto one graphic. So this is the tweet that I missed. Trossard seems to be okay. He trained this morning. He's feeling good. Now, I'm going to assume there's probably not a huge amount of Trossard owners watching this, but if you have got him and you've got other things to deal with, maybe he'll start for you against Forest at home. You never know, and obviously he's a massive differential. No one should be buying him right now. For everything else, I'll work from the bottom up. So Arteta confirmed that Declan Rice and Bukayo Saka took part in partial training for the first time this morning. So, look, is that true? I don't know. Is this really the first time they've trained? Possibly. And partial training doesn't sound ideal. You want them in full team training, especially when the match is tomorrow. But that could also just not be the complete truth. I think the fact they haven't been ruled out completely is good. But I can't obviously sit here and guarantee that they will both start. If I had to put money on it, I'm going to assume they start because I'm never quite sure about whether or not Arteta's telling us the truth on close calls like this. Like, it's worth saying for Benjamin White, he said he's out for months. So he is happy to rule players out. But when it's close like Saka and Rice, the information you get is not necessarily the whole truth. Look, no one's buying Rice for FPL anyway. For Saka, if you've got him, no cause for panic. I think you just play him. There's no need to transfer him out. If you're looking to bring him in, that's a trickier situation to be in. I think it depends who you're selling. Like if it was Son to Saka, for example, because you don't know for sure that Saka's going to be available and you're not going to be looking to captain him in Game Week 12 or anything like that, I'd be tempted just to hold Son and make sure that Saka is back fit before you buy him. It's not ideal because if Saka does play against Forest at home, he's better than Son against City away. But holding that transfer and just getting the information in this case might be worth it. If you're selling a midfielder that's a bit of a dud or just no good to you or injured or suspended or something like that, then I think you just take the risk on Saka. So it probably depends who you're selling. But for most people, if he was always your plan to bring in Game Week 12, I'd probably still do it. But I don't think we can be completely shocked if he misses out. It's worth noting that Saka did miss the last game after an international break. But for that one, he went off for England in the first game and then missed out. Whereas this time, he went off against Chelsea, hasn't played for England, and now apparently he's only just back in training. I don't know if that's true. If you can, wait until as close to the deadline as possible. I don't think we'll get any lineup news because the Arsenal game's at 3 and the Chelsea's early kickoff at 12:30. But you just never know what's going to come out overnight from journalists and stuff like that. So I don't see a massive problem with buying Saka, but if you've got a decent forward this week, decent midfielder this week you can play instead that you were looking to transfer out, I would just do that. and save the transfer. Benjamin White out for months. Calafiori back in the squad to face Forest. I don't think I'd be looking to buy Calafiori right now. Like, he hasn't played since game week 8, so he's missed basically from the last international break. Sorry, no, actually, game week 8 was after the last international break, but he's missed the 3 subsequent. I shouldn't have said that word because I almost got it wrong. He's missed the 3 games after game week 8, basically. I think when he's fully fit, he's in that Arsenal 11, especially with White missing out. There's just no need to buy him. At 5.8 million, Timber's 0.3 cheaper and Saliba's only 0.2 more expensive. So I'd just try and find the money. I wouldn't buy Calafiori over Timber, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Tierney's not ready. I don't think he's ever going to be an FPL pick again for Arsenal. He also confirmed that Tomiyasu remains unavailable and injured. So he's also not around. So right now, Arsenal, if Calafiori and Timber are fit, you would assume that most of the time it's going to be Calafiori, Gabriel, Saliba and Timber. Now, I know what Arsenal fans and maybe some non-Arsenal fans are going to tell me. Partey can play as the right back and move into midfield. Absolutely. But if Timber and Calafiori are fit, I think you just play them, right? So I think with Benjamin, I don't know why I keep calling him Benjamin, with White out, Tomiyasu out as well, and Calafiori only just back, I think Timber's going to get serious minutes over the next few game weeks. The only concern I would have with Timber is whether he can stay fit with all the additional matches over December. That's the only problem. When you look at his minutes so far, he's started 8 times in 11 game weeks. Game week 1, I don't think he was fully fit. And then he missed game week 7 and 8 through injury. Every other game that he's been available for, he's started. So in terms of starts when he's fit, that looks good. The problem is whether he can stay fit, right? And obviously if, when White comes back and Calafiori's fully fit, there might be a little bit more rotation. But Ben White's going to be out until 2025. You've got a lot of games over December. I think Timber for 5.5 is quite tempting. The numbers don't really suggest he's going to be massively attacking in the Arsenal team, but that price saving could be nice. I'll say this though, if you can afford Saliba or Gabriel, I'd just buy them instead. They're much safer. And I think if you buy an Arsenal defender, you're going to want them for quite a while, so you might as well just pay the extra. But I think with these injuries, Timber's definitely an option now. So Maresca held his press conference for Chelsea on Thursday, and this is what he said. On the impact of international duty, he said the ones that will play for sure will not be 100%. So it sounds like some of the players that are going to be in that first 11 won't be 100% match fit. Unfortunately, he didn't name exactly who those players were. I think a lot of the time, players probably are playing through knocks and aren't always 100% fit. We just don't know about it. So that probably wouldn't put me off massively. But let me go through what else he said as well. So he confirmed that Cole Palmer and Levi Colwill are better after international duty. He also believes Reece James will soon have a long run in the team. I'm not sure I believe that, but I really do hope it happens. I think Reece James is a brilliant player. I'd love to see him get a bit of luck when it comes to injuries. I want to see him play. On injuries, though, Maresca said we have for sure just one injured player, and that's Reece James, who unfortunately felt something small, and we don't want to take a risk for the weekend. So if you've got Reece James, he's a sell. You shouldn't be buying him. And even if he is back fit at some point, he's just not worth the headache for FPL, unfortunately. He did say the rest are better or a doubt. That last little bit does concern me a tad because we know Palmer was seen limping after the Arsenal game and he didn't train much before that. He has been seen in training this week, though. So hopefully he's getting better. The fact that he only named Reece James as an injured player makes me think that the likes of Colwill, Palmer, Jackson, etc. will all start. Even if they're a slight doubt or not 100%, I think they're going to be in that first 11. So if you're looking to buy any of those players, I don't think what Maresca has said would put me off. And the fact that he said specifically that Palmer and Colwill are better after international duty is obviously a positive sign. And I just think Leicester away is such a good fixture, I probably wouldn't let the other quotes put me off. It's not ideal hearing a manager say the rest are better or a doubt, but that could be about anyone, right? So unless we get any more information between now and the deadline, I think for those of you that were planning to buy Palmer in game week 12, that is still a pretty good move. In terms of Jackson, I think he's a good option going forward, but the 4 yellow card situation would probably put me off buying him. But Cole Palmer, I would still go there. Let's just hope that he's not one of the doubts. So for Spurs, Ange Postecoglou confirmed that Christian Romero is going to be missing the Man City game. He said he won't be right for tomorrow's game. We're hoping he will be alright for next week. The The ones who were out before that are still out. So the likes of Richarlison and Van de Ven that already had injuries are not back yet. So that means, essentially, it's advantage to Erling Haaland owners because Spurs don't have either of their first choice centre-backs. So it's going to be a lineup of Udogie, Davies, Dragusin and Porro. So the chances of Haaland getting a brace have definitely just gone up. In terms of Spurs options, the most popular defender is probably Porro. If you've still got him, I mentioned earlier this week, I think it's a pretty good time to sell. I don't see a huge amount of clean sheets on the horizon. We don't yet know when Van de Ven's going to be back. Ange didn't confirm like 100% that Romero will be back in 13 either, although it sounds like there is a good chance that he will be. Either way, there are cheaper defenders that are probably going to provide better value. On the flip side, just to play devil's advocate, in Porro you do have a 90-minute player every single week, and we do have a midweek game week and game week 14 coming up. So if you had to play Porro against Fulham at home, Bournemouth away, Chelsea at home, and could bench him this week, it's really not the end of the world. It's not like there's a bunch of other defenders that are absolutely essential or anything like that. So if you're looking to sell Porro, fine. If you've got other issues to deal with, I think holding on to him, especially if you can bench him this week, looks pretty good. But in terms of a clean sheet for Spurs, I'd be extremely surprised. So for Man City, this is what Pep Guardiola said about injuries. For Stones and Akanji, they've trained good. And then he went on to say that Ake is coming back to training, so we didn't have any centre-backs, and now we have 3. Ruben Dias is out, but hopefully back soon. So it sounds like Stones and Akanji are going to be available. If Ake is only just coming back from training, I'd find it surprising if he starts straight away. But obviously it sounds like he's going to be an option for Pep sooner rather than later. So defensively, Man City should improve a little bit. The only problem is one of the players they've used quite consistently in midfield is Kovacic, and he said he will be out for a while, 3 weeks or a month. So that is not ideal. I think the knock-on effects are Pep is going to have to figure out how to stop so many chances being conceded from that defence without Kovacic. I'm not really sure what the option will be. Maybe that means Rico Lewis's minutes will go up in terms of playing in a midfield position, even if Vardiol and Walker start as the fullbacks. Maybe we'll see something like Vardiol, Ake, Stones, Akanji, and they'll build up with the back 3 and Stones will play in midfield, which he's done before. I'm not sure, but I don't think it would be the worst game to play your Spurs attackers in. In terms of Man City defenders, Vardiol's minutes are still going to be great going forward. I don't think Spurs at home or Liverpool away are fixtures to buy him for, but if you've already got him, the fixtures get pretty good from 14 onwards. So he's not a bad long-term hold. I think the minutes will be decent. We know he's got some attacking threat. With Rico Lewis, I just don't know. I keep coming back to the fact that he has played a lot of games so far this year. He started 9 times in the first 11, often plays 90 minutes as well. And with Kovacic out, maybe that does help Rico Lewis a little bit. But I think the problem is you're still going to have a bit of a headache every week about whether or not he starts. And when he doesn't start, he often comes on for like a cameo as well, which is annoying, right? But I think if you've got other things to deal with, holding him until those good fixtures for 14 just to see what happens over the next couple of games really wouldn't be the worst idea, right? Especially if you've got defenders that can cover him. I wouldn't be expecting clean sheets in the next 2 anyway. So maybe Kovacic helps Lewis a little bit, but either way, with all those defenders coming back, Pep might think of something different and he might have someone like Stones playing him in that midfield position instead. Maybe he'll even go for like a double pivot of 2 more defensively minded players just to shore things up a bit. That seems unlikely, but you never know. Anyway, I'm not much of a tactician when it comes to City, but they got some players back that will help them, but Kovacic missing is big. So we'll quickly talk about Bournemouth. I know a few people were worried about Semenyo. So Semenyo and Kirkes are both available, but Bournemouth took precautions over underlying issues. Tendinitis, according to Iriola, exacerbated by lots of minutes at a young age. The international break allowed the Cherries to rest and treat the issues. So it does sound like both Kirkes and Semenyo have got a little bit of a problem there, but hopefully it can be managed, and obviously when they can rest them, they will. So if you've got Semenyo, I suspect he'll start in game week 12 against Brighton at home and probably start every game after that unless he picks up another injury. If you're thinking about buying Semenyo, just remember that he's on 4 yellow cards. I don't think... If you've got 7 other attackers that aren't really much of an issue in terms of close to a suspension or minutes and stuff like that, I still actually don't mind buying Semenyo more so than a Jackson just because he's a lot cheaper and the fixtures are decent. Now, Jackson's fixtures are good as well, but he's a big chunk of your budget that could be missing through the yellow cards suspension soon. With Semenyo, you don't have that. But just keep that in mind, because if you've got a lot of other issues in your team, you don't necessarily want to buy another one. But for anyone that's got Semenyo, I'm sure he's going to start in 12. So let's get into some of your questions. Nice and simple to start us off. Who would you play this week, Solanke or Rodgers? Now, I've got this dilemma myself. At the moment, I'm starting Rodgers, and I'm pretty sure that's going to stick. But it is quite a close call. As I mentioned with my predictions for the Pick'em game on Sleeper earlier, I do think there's going to be goals in that City-Spurs game, at least based off how Man City have been playing recently. I guess it's worth saying that there's been an international break. Pep's had 2 weeks to think about how he's going to stop his team conceding so many chances. Maybe they'll figure out a way to make it more difficult for Spurs. But if any team's going to cause them problems, it's the likes of Liverpool, Spurs, Arsenal, etc. So I'm not completely happy about benching Solanke. But I think if I go by the fixtures, it's got to be Rodgers. And also, I quite like the fact that Rodgers has had a bit more of a rest over this international break than he has done over the previous ones. He's still been away on international duty, but because he was with the senior team for England, he got fewer minutes than he would have done with the under-21. So I'm going to play Rodgers, but it's one of those decisions that if you sat there and said, I think you've got that wrong, I'm going to play Solanke, I wouldn't argue. I think it's perfectly reasonable to play him as well. There is a chance, by the way, that I just play both. But that's more of a Solanke versus Strand Larsen decision rather than Rodgers versus Solanke. So, yeah, out of the two, I'm going to stick with Rodgers for now. But I think if you want to play Solanke, that's absolutely reasonable. So, like many, I delayed the Haaland move, and I'm wondering if it's still worth jumping off to Salah. Now, lots of people ask me this question specifically for the Final Thoughts video. I have covered it in other videos during the international break, so I don't have a huge amount more to add. But I'll leave you with these two things to consider when it comes to this move. First of all, are you happy with the rest of your squad, or do you need extra funds to bring in players that you would consider key players over the next 4 to 6 weeks, in which case selling Haaland to Salah frees up some of that money? And two, are you happy with your captaincy options over the next 6 to 8 weeks? So if you're sat there with a Haaland draft, and you're thinking I can captain him or Palmer or him or Salah, depending on what your setup looks like, and the rest of the squad actually looks okay. Of course, there's always going to be a player that you don't have, but you can't have the perfect team every single week. If you're mostly happy with your squad and your captaincy choices, then it's perfectly reasonable to keep Haaland. Like, lots of people will make out like this decision is black and white. It's either so obvious you should keep Haaland or so obvious that you should go to Salah. But it's a lot closer a decision than that. And also, by the way, if you do Haaland to Salah, that costs 2 transfers. Right? It's not just one move, unless you've got a ton of money in the bank from somewhere. And then if you do want to then spread that extra money around, that's even more transfers. So if you're if you're sat there with Haaland, a pretty good squad and only one transfer, there's probably no need to be taking a hit to get Salah in. Likewise, if you're looking at your squad thinking, I'm not happy with it, I need more money, and I'd still be happy with my captaincy options even without Haaland, then maybe you should make the move. To use my team as an example, I did this in Game Week 10, and obviously, I've got Trent. Now, Trent, for most people, is not an option right now. Obviously, he's missing Game Week 12. No one's buying him. Lots of people are going to sell him. Let's just say that instead of Trent, I had Colwill. That would give me 4.2 million in the bank, right? If I wanted to do Solanke back to Haaland, so I had a Haaland draft instead, I'd still need to find 3.4 million from somewhere to do that. And I wouldn't want to drop my double Arsenal defence. And I guess I could drop Salah down to a 9.4, but that doesn't leave me enough to go for like a Son or a Saka. I'd have to go for like, I don't even know, like a Gordon, I guess. And so then I'd have Haaland, Palmer, Bruno to keep my double Arsenal defence. And there's nothing wrong with this team, right? I can just captain Palmer or Haaland pretty much every single week. But I personally just think having like a Solanke or an Isak up front and then having the money to go for Salah and keep double Arsenal defence and have 4.2 million to spend to go and get Saka later on as well, possibly for Mbeumo in my team, like that just feels like a better setup. And I've still got 1.6 million in the bank. And as I've said many, many times, Haaland's going to be an incredible captain for so many weeks between now and 17. But in none of those weeks do I feel like he's massively better than Palmer or Salah or Saka. And again, just to reiterate something I feel like I've been a broken record on, even when you get to game week 18 when Haaland's got Everton at home, Salah's got Leicester at home. Even when you get to game week 90 when Haaland's got Leicester away, Palmer's got Ipswich away. So as long as those players stay fit, there's other captaincy options. So for me, I have made the move already. I don't regret it. I know as soon as Haaland gets a hat-trick, there's going to be loads of I told you so's, but the hope would be that the team without Haaland will still do better over the long run, right? Like, of course Haaland's going to score goals. I think the idea that people think that those of us that have sold him don't realise that is crazy. Of course he's going to score loads of goals, but you would hope over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, the non-Haaland team with the more money spread around with better options will win out. I just think like Saka, Palmer, Salah, Fernandes, and I could have, like, obviously you can have the perfect team if you take hits, but budget-wise, it would also be possible to have Isak up front and still have double Arsenal defence, which I really back moving forward. If you don't want to put money in your defence, you just want to make it as cheap as possible and you're already set up in a way, keep Haaland, honestly. And go for Haaland and Palmer or Haaland and Salah. It doesn't matter, whatever you're happy with. It's not a black and white decision where it has to be one way or the other. You have to look at your own team. How many transfers do you have? Are you happy with the team? If not, maybe you still make the move. Is it like an absolute must that you've got to sell Haaland before Spurs at home? Of course not, right? That's a good fixture. Haaland will get chances in that game. The De Bruyne thing that people keep mentioning, by the way, of course you'd rather have De Bruyne in the team, but I wouldn't be massively confident about him playing all games over Christmas or staying fit, and Haaland's getting chances without him. So as much as a Haaland owner would be happier with De Bruyne, I don't think it's a massive impact in the decision. So is it still worth jumping off? Possibly. Unfortunately, I have to say it's going to be team dependent, but that's what I would consider. I've also said that I don't have much to add, and I've just done 5 minutes on this question. Are you happy with the rest of your team? Are you happy with captaincy? They are the two things you need to be happy with, and then you just make the decision based off that. I think it is as simple as that, but selling Haaland is never fun, and it's not fun watching Man City games without him, but FPL points are fun, and so far it's been all right. So what are your thoughts on under-the-radar options like Gordon, De Bruyne and Odegaard? Now, the first thing to say is they're all midfielders, and the reason that I bring that up is it does feel like at this specific time in FPL, there are not many midfield spots to go around, especially off the back of the last question, if you've sold Haaland. So a lot of people right now are going to have a cheap midfielder. I've got Rodgers, it could be Smith Rowe, Semenyo, etc. Mbeumo is going to be in a lot of people's teams that are watching this. Palmer, super popular 12 onwards. If you've sold Haaland, you've almost certainly got Salah. So that's 4 of the 5. And then in the 5th spot, I've got Fernandes. Some people might even have like a Saka there. So the idea that you would bring in any of those under-the-radar options for any of these players right now, probably not going to happen. Like even with Mbeumo, you might want to sell him soon, but you're not going to sell him before Everton away and Leicester at home. If you've got Fernandes, you ain't selling him before Ipswich away and Everton at home, and the premium midfielders are better, and the likes of Rodgers are so much cheaper, most people just won't have the money to upgrade them. So I think all 3 of these players could be okay, but do I think they get in place of most of the midfielders that people have right now? Not really. Like Anthony Gordon, for example, I quite like. I think at his price, it's pretty decent. I think he's like 7.2. Yeah, 7.2 million. So he's comparable with like a Brennan Johnson, for example, that people might be looking to get rid of with the City away game. And I like the Newcastle fixtures. I've mentioned that with Isak already. So in isolation, I think for his price, Gordon's pretty good value from 12 to 17. And he might actually be my favourite of these 3 players. So I don't mind Gordon if you've got a spot for him. And I would say that people that have kept Haaland have probably got one freer midfield spot than the rest of us, right? Because you haven't got a Salah there. You've probably got someone a lot cheaper. So I quite like Gordon. De Bruyne, you know, over the last few weeks, I've been asked about Phil Foden pretty much every game week, and I've said I've got no interest. I've got even less interest in De Bruyne. It's Spurs at home, Liverpool away next. Not terrible fixtures. They'll get chances against Spurs in particular. But De Bruyne has had 16 minutes worth of Premier League game time since game week 4. So that's a problem. You've got a midweek fixture in game week 14. I'm just not convinced that De Bruyne comes in and plays all these matches. And I also think that fitness is a concern because the way Pep kept talking about De Bruyne was that he's back training, but he's just not. I don't want to say he's not feeling it, but I got the feeling that Pep thought De Bruyne should have been back quicker than he was. And so maybe De Bruyne is just not confident in his fitness at the moment. I don't know, but he had issues last year as well. I think it's the wrong time to buy a player like that over December when you got matches so frequently. And for 9.4 million as well, I just think it makes zero sense. I'm not a fan of Foden for FPL right now, but I'm even less of a fan of De Bruyne. And then Odegaard, I don't mind him. The thing is for me, right, 8.2 million, Arsenal do have better fixtures over the next 5 or 6 than Man United, right? That is clear for everyone to see. But at 8.2 million, he's only 0.2 million cheaper than Fernandes. And Fernandes has penalties. Odegaard will only take penalties if Saka's not on the pitch or not available. And so I just... And also you block an Arsenal spot. Now, not everybody will want a double up on the Arsenal defence and like a Saka, but I don't know if I'd want to close that option off. I don't know what it is about Odegaard. I just find him like a very boring FPL pick. And often when people say this is a boring pick, what they actually mean is this player is going to consistently get points. It's just a bit rubbish that everyone owns him. So maybe by me saying that Odegaard is boring, he's actually quite good. But I just think he's a Bruno Fernandes without penalties. And I don't know if the fixtures are so much better for Arsenal that it's worth going for Odegaard over Fernandes. I mean, you can have both of them depending on your midfield setup. I don't know. I would just... I mean, I guess Havertz is not much of a consideration right now if you block that off because of Isak and Jackson and Solanke. I really like the double defence. I just wouldn't want to stop being able to get Saka. And obviously, if you get Odegaard, it doesn't stop you getting Saka. You can make that sideways move. But if you've got double Arsenal defence and Odegaard, and then Salah gets injured, you've got to make 2 transfers to get Saka in, right? Because you've got to reduce the money, etc. So, yeah, I'm not really a fan of any of them, to be honest. I think Gordon's okay because he's only 7.2, and I think he will fit into some people's squads that have still got like a 7.5 million midfielder or below slot free, and I think the fixtures are good. So I like Gordon. I also like the fact that he always plays when he's fit, 90 minutes pretty much every game. That's good over December. De Bruyne, no interest. Odegaard's fine. That's what I would leave it at. He's fine. Do I have any interest in getting him anytime soon? Probably not. So everyone seems to be jumping on João Pedro, but isn't Jackson a better pick if money is no object? Chelsea fixtures are excellent. Even with the 4 yellow cards, it feels worth the risk with high potential upside. I'll say this about Nicholas Jackson. Any game he plays in pretty much over the next 8 to 10 weeks, he'll do well in because of how good Chelsea's fixtures are. I don't think there's too many bad ones over the next kind of 10 weeks. Like, the worst one is probably Spurs away, right? And you're not going to be worried about playing Jackson in that game. So he does have potential to get plenty of points, and there is high upside there. For me, though, the 4 yellow card situation would be enough to just not go there. And it's not because I think Jackson's a bad pick. I just think there's other picks that are just as good, if not slightly better, that don't have that 4 yellow card situation. And your team might look perfectly fine right now to be able to deal with a suspension, but you don't know what's going to happen over the next few weeks. You might get other suspensions through yellow cards, red cards. You might get injuries. All of a sudden, you're down 2 players. And then you might be looking back thinking, was Nicholas Jackson worth it? He could absolutely smash it, even just in the next 3. Leicester away, Villa at home, Southampton away. Or he could pick up a yellow card against Villa and miss Southampton. And that wouldn't be ideal. And I think for 0.6 million more, you get Isak. Right? So I really never try and sit here and put people off, but that is why I wouldn't buy Nicholas Jackson. And like even with Solanke, I know the hype's going to die down because he's got City away this week. He's just blanked against Ipswich, which is not ideal. But even he from like 13 to 16 is not a bad option. He's a little bit cheaper than Jackson. So there's other options. It's not like Nicholas Jackson is so good that no one else compares. So that's why, for me, the 4 yellow cards is a problem. On the João Pedro thing, I do want to temper expectations a little bit because I think the way lots of us are probably talking about João Pedro right now, it's like he's the best thing since sliced bread. But just on the money is no object part of that, money always becomes a thing at some point. You might not need the money right now, but you'll need it at some stage over the next few weeks. It's a bit similar to saying I'm going to make this transfer because I don't need to make one next week. Something can happen, right? So right now, if I was buying between the two, I think I would just go João Pedro. He doesn't have that yellow card problem. He is absolute value for money at 5.5. He has now gone up from 5.4. He's on penalties, Jackson isn't. And look, João Pedro's minutes are not necessarily going to be 80 to 90 every single week. He might miss a game over the next 5 to 6. I think that's completely possible. But you're spending a lot less money on that compared to Jackson. So I really don't want to put people off buying particular players, unless it's a terrible pick, right? Which Nicholas Jackson clearly isn't. But if I was buying between the two this week, I'd go João Pedro. It also helps, by the way, that Brighton's fixtures are really good right now. And again, I want to temper expectations a little bit on what you should expect from João Pedro, but João Pedro is not a 5.5 million forward in terms of what he can deliver. He's more like a 6.5, 7. Some people might even say he's can score as well as a 7.5. So I think when you factor that in, and Jackson on 4 yellows, I would go for João Pedro and save the money. So is it a huge gamble to go without Palmer this week? I'm more tempted to bring Isak in before West Ham and get Palmer in game week 13. The early away Leicester fixture feels not that tempting. Am I overthinking? How do you stop overthinking? Just on that last line, I think often people say they're overthinking when they're just thinking about a decision. I think that's perfectly fine to do. In terms of overthinking, I guess the easiest way to stop it for FPL is just to make a transfer and forget about it. But that's easier said than done. Is it a huge gamble to go without Palmer? I would say no. And I think a lot of people that have got Palmer probably aren't going to captain him. I think if you've got Palmer or Haaland, most people are going to go Haaland. If you've got Palmer and Salah, most people are going to go Salah. So in terms of massive ownership, Palmer is quite highly owned, but I don't think he's going to be highly captained. In terms of Isak, like, he's got the home game against West Ham versus an away game for Palmer, but on paper, I'd rather have Palmer against Leicester away than Isak, West Ham at home. Like, I would think of it like this. If I had both of them in my team this week, who would I captain? If I had to choose between Isak and Palmer, it's quite close, but I'm like 99% sure I would pick Palmer every single time. So to me, it tells me that he is the better pick this week. You can always pick up Palmer next week. You can always pick up Isak next week instead. So it's not a huge gamble, but if I'm choosing between the two, I'm probably going Palmer over Isak, despite what Maresca said about there being some doubts. Unless we get more information, I think Palmer being brought in this week is absolutely fine. So I'll end as normal by talking about my own team. And I wish I could tell you that the press conference updates mean that I know exactly what I'm going to do now with my transfers. But unfortunately, that's not the case. I guess the information we've got has narrowed down the potential options a little bit. So Pinnock and Mbeumo, for example, I didn't talk about Brentford earlier, but Thomas Frank expects them both to be available this weekend and Visser as well. So there's no need to even worry about them not playing. I'm sure Pinnock and Mbeumo will both be in the first 11. So I don't need to worry about transferring them out. Just to go through some of the other players I'm not concerned about. Raya and Gabriel double up on Arsenal defence. Palmer, although he's still flagged and Maresca mentioned the doubts, I'm obviously going to play him. Bruno Fernandes is fine as normal. Salah captain. Rodgers is in the 11. Then I've got Raul Jimenez and Solanke up front with Strand Larsen on the bench. Now, on paper, Fulham away is a better fixture than City away, but I think Solanke will get the full 90 minutes. Strand Larsen might not. And also with Kovacic out, that probably helps Solanke a little bit more as well. So I'm probably going to play Solanke. Now, I think the only two players that I'm even considering transferring out are Trent or Rico Lewis. Now, as much as Slot was great at telling us that Trent's not training, so therefore he's probably not going to play in game week 12, he didn't give us a time frame. There is part of me that still kind of wants to keep hold of him a little bit. If I knew for sure he'd be back for game week 14 or 15, I would consider holding him because I could just sell Rico Lewis instead and just put Trent on the bench. It's not ideal having that much money on the bench, but if I think he's a good long-term pick, it's not the end of the world to do that. The problem is I can't be sure exactly when he's going to be back, and I kind of just want to spend that money. So basically, my option is Lewis out and bench Trent, or just sell Trent. Because Rico Lewis, possibly, if his minutes go up, could be a good option from game week 14 onwards. And I think if I do sell Trent, I've just got that money ready for a move in the future if I don't use it this week. So if I had to say right now what I'm most likely to do, is probably to sell Trent. It's worth saying, by the way, I already have 1.7 in the bank. So if I sell Lewis, I can basically get any defender that I want. I think the most expensive defender after Trent is Van Dijk at 6.3. Yeah, Van Dijk at 6.3. So I can actually just afford to get him. I just don't know if I want to wrap that much money up in my defence just to hold Trent, it doesn't feel great. In terms of cheap defenders, Hall, Colwill, Van Heck are probably my main options. I guess with Reece James out, Gusto is possibly an option moving forward. I just don't necessarily trust his fitness, to be honest with you. I think when he's fit, his minutes will be good. It's just whether or not he can stay fit over all these games. I just don't think he will. I'd rather just buy Colwill, I think. In terms of Man United defenders, I've thought about them a bit more. Even someone like De Ligt, right? My assumption is that it'll be absolutely nailed on. But if we think that Luke Shaw or Martinez is going to be the left centre-back in the back three, and João is going to be the right centre-back when he's fit and integrated into that team, there's only one more spot, and there's quite a few centre-backs for Man United. So do I want to take that risk? Like, he started 8 of the 11 so far, but obviously Ten Hag's not there anymore. The first couple of games, you know, he was new to the squad, etc. Is he going to be absolutely nailed under Amrabat? I'm just not sure. So I don't think I can go there either. So I still don't really know where I'm going. I think Luca Dean is someone I did I mention him yesterday? I can't remember. A few people talked about him in the comments. I just know something will go wrong as soon as I put him in. I do like the fixtures that Aston Villa have, though. I think I really wish I knew. I think my most likely move is Trent to Colwill instead of Hall. I might still go for Hall. I don't know. I'm all over the place still. And then just spend that money straight away on Isak. And by doing that, I'm pricing myself out of getting Saka. But I think with my squad, it doesn't really matter. Like, I've got Fernandes, Salah, Palmer, and Burmo midfield, which is fine still. I know Man United and Brentford have got some dodgy-ish fixtures coming up, but they're not awful, like overall, like long-term. I think they're okay to hold for now, and having Isak and Solanke up front looks quite nice. The only forward I'm missing is João Pedro, but that's also playing on my mind. I'm basically blocking a move for João Pedro. I guess I could sell Raul Jimenez at some point. It's just all these extra transfers. The other option, by the way, is just to sell Trent and just save the money. I don't have to buy Isak this week. The thing is, if I buy Isak, if you look at my first 11 right now, I'm playing Rodgers and Solanke and benching Strand Larsen. If I do Strand Larsen for Isak, I'm playing him, obviously. So then I'm benching Solanke. So I'm taking a -4 to not play Solanke. When you say it out loud, it doesn't sound that great, even though Isak's clearly better than Solanke this week. I don't know what more I can say. The thing I wish I knew right now at the time of recording is what's going to push me one way or another. And ultimately, I think it's just going to be, there's a deadline coming. I have to make a decision. And it's just going to force me to go for something. I really just don't know what it is. I'm so undecided. But I think Trent will go. It's just whether I spend the money. And it's which cheap player do I bring in. Like, I could go for like a Canate or Van Dijk. But then you're bringing him in just before Man City next week. It just doesn't feel ideal. I feel like I'm not going to be getting Saka anytime soon. Thing is, if I don't get Isak and I sell Trent for someone cheap, let's just go back to Lewis Hall for a second. I've got 4.3 minutes, so that does give me enough to do in Burmo to Saka. But then Saka's a doubt going into this week. I just know if I buy Saka again, as great as he is, he's going to be like a doubt every single week. And Arteta's never going to give us the information. Like, do I want that headache? Then Isak, yeah. I don't really want to take a hit, but I feel like I will. I think Trent to Hall or Colwill and Strand Larsen to Isak is probably what I'm going to do. But I'm going to spend some time tonight thinking about this even more. I'm probably going to be on the deadline stream tomorrow, not any more convinced about what I'm going to do. Trent's annoying. I kind of wanted to have him as a differential. It's just not worked out. I think he's got to go. I'm going to leave it there because, a bit like yesterday's video, I could talk for another 20, 30, 40 minutes plus, and I'm not going to be any closer. So I'll leave it there. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Make sure to enter the Let's Talk FPL League for the Premier League Pick'ems game over on Sleeper. Link in the description below. Otherwise, I'll catch you tomorrow for the deadline stream.